Hey guys, welcome back to another episode here. So we've run our numbers, we've determined what our maximum allowable offer is going to be, and now we're going to put together an offer. So I think this video, I'm going to explain to you guys how we typically put together an offer. Now this is going to be different from every realtor, every real estate investor that you talk to. They might have a different way of doing things. So this is just our opinion. The other thing I have to say, I'm also not a lawyer, okay? So if you need legal advice, please talk to a lawyer first. These are just the things that we typically do. And I'll walk you guys through kind of the high level points that we really focus on to make sure that when we're putting an offer in, that we're protecting ourselves and we're also coming through as responsible purchasers, okay? So let's check it out. Okay, let's dive right into it. So for the offer that we're going to be submitting, we're going to actually be using the OREA template, the Agreement of Purchase and Sale. This is the most commonly used one. Now, just to preface as well, and so that people know that this Agreement of Purchase and Sale, it is trademarked by the Canadian Real Estate Association. So just when you're using this, it's something to note. Talk to a lawyer once again. If you want to kind of follow all the 100% rules and you want to go with your own customized agreement of purchase and sale, that is something that a lawyer can very easily draft. It's just in my opinion, everyone uses this, whether they're a realtor or not. So we're going to go through it just so that people kind of recognize the high level items. Okay, so here we're going to date on the actual day that we're going to be submitting the offer. Now, under the buyer, typically I do it two different ways. Well, actually three different ways. It's either Alex Pal, I do Alex Pal and or assigns, or I would put my company name, which would be Pal Property Solutions. And it really depends on how you're structuring the deal. But in this situation, what I'm doing is Alex Pal and or assigns. I'm just indicating that I may be assigning this deal in the future. So whether I'm assigning it to the corporation, I'm assigning it to another buyer, I'm being very clear about that. Okay, I've left the seller's name out for now just for privacy reasons, of course. Of course, you put in your property address here as well. And for the purchase price, remember when we talked about our maximum allowable offer, we were at about $140,000. But just to see, I'm going to approach them with an offer of $130,000 to see maybe they might take that. Maybe we can work something out. Okay. The deposit. A deposit actually has to be submitted upon acceptance. Well, there's a couple of different options here, but typically what we do is we're going to actually find who the buyer's lawyer is. All right. We're going to make sure that it's in trust. So whoever, like, let's say it's AJ McDonald, I don't know, that's just a lawyer I'm making up here. You put a negotiable check payable to AJ McDonald in trust. And now for a deposit amount, it could vary $1,000 to $5,000. I've seen people put $200. But I find that typically, at least if you're in the $1,000 mark, you're legitimizing it a little bit more. But that's, once again, my opinion. Some people might think differently, right? And the last kind of part on page 1 here that we focus on are the schedules. So we're going to have a Schedule A that we're going to talk about, which is very important. And we're also going to, like, for myself personally, because I do myself have a realtor's license, I include a disclosure of interest. Okay, so not everybody who's, obviously if you're not a realtor, you don't have to put a disclosure of interest, but I always make sure that disclosure, we're being upfront, we're being honest all the time. The irrevocability is just how long the deal is good for. So typically, you can give, until midnight that day, or you can give a couple business days or whatever the case may be so that they can take it and look at it. But typically, I like to get a deal signed right when I'm there, so I don't give a long irrevocability period. What ends up happening is when you put in an offer and you say, okay, well, tell you what, take the weekend to think about it. Over the weekend, they're talking with their family, they're talking with their friends, and then all of a sudden, this person knows someone who's going to buy it instead, and oh yeah, so you get into all this. When you're face to face with the seller, you want to be able to lock that deal in. Okay, so that's why I always bring 2 copies of this whole package with me, so that they keep one and I keep one myself. And then, of course, the completion date is just when the deal is going to be done. So when you're going to actually close on the property. So pretty standard stuff. And of course, you're going to initial wherever applicable. Now on page 2 here, you'll see that it says the chattel's included. So these are things like, the fridges, the stoves, the washers, dryers, that kind of thing. If you want them to be included, then you can keep them in there. For this typical property, to be honest with you, we probably don't want any of them, but we're going to tell her, whatever she doesn't want to take with her, she can leave it. So I'm not going to put anything into the included chattels right now. Fixtures excluded. This would be if, for instance, they have like a family heirloom, like a chandelier that's affixed to the real property. So that's a very common one. An heirloom of some sort that's screwed into the wall. They want to maybe take that with them, that kind of thing. So, and then rental items. This would be like a hot water tank or a furnace, and in this particular case, there isn't any sort of rental items. And because it is residential, HST is included in. So moving forward, and I know we're moving really quick on this, so if there's any specific questions, feel free to reach out to me. And even if you have an offer that you want to put in, but you're not quite sure how to structure it, reach out. I'd love to help you guys. I'd love to see what you guys are doing so that maybe we can give you some pointers as well. Or if you have a real estate agent that you really like to work with, this is what they do. They, put together offers, negotiate deals, that kind of thing. So you can always reach out to a realtor to maybe give you a hand with this. One tip: whenever I talk about a conditional period, or like in this situation, title search is just gives the lawyer a bit of time to look to make sure that there's no outstanding liens on the property, or they do the background check, right, which is part of the title search. I don't put the actual date, like let's say the fifth day of whatever particular month. I always put 5 days before closing, because that way, if our closing date gets amended, that we don't have to remember to change this date as well, because this is a sliding scale. It'll move with whatever the date is that we've set as our closing. Right? So just a little tip for you guys there. And so I'm going to skip through a lot of the legal jargon and just kind of get right to the Schedule A, because I think that's the most important part. This would be the page here on page 5 where we're going to do the actual signing. And this is if there's any back and forth, like let's say they make a change to the price and they say, well, you know what, we want to meet you at the middle, 135,000 instead of 130, then we would cross it out and then we would initial next to it, and then the party who's made that change gives it back to the individual, and it's the person who finally agrees to the contract when it's gone back and forth, signs this confirmation of acceptance. Very, very important. This is probably the most important signature here and here throughout the whole thing. So, Schedule A. This is where we actually get into the conditions. Now, once again, people are going to have a different opinion on this, different ways of doing things, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with any of the ways, as long as you're doing it right and you're being safe to protect yourself and you're being fair to the buyer as well, or sorry, to the seller. So I always start here with that the buyer agrees to pay the balance of the purchase price, subject to adjustments to the seller on completion of this transaction, with funds drawn on a lawyer's trust account in the form of bank draft, certified check, or wire transfer using the large value transfer system. This is a standard standard clause that we always put into offers, just indicating how they're going to get paid the balance of the purchase price once they've done their statement of adjustments. Okay. The seller agrees to allow the buyer and or its agents to enter the property from time to time. Okay, so I prefer, once again, this is a little tip. A lot of people put in there like 3 or 4 revisits before the end of the year, or before the closing date. So rather than indicating a specific number of times, because after you've used up those 3 or 4, really the seller has the right to say, sorry, you've already used up all your walkthroughs. We're not interested anymore, right? So instead, we put from time to time after acceptance of this agreement of purchase and sale before closing, upon giving 24 hours notice of this transaction. This shall also apply to any formal appraisals or contractor quotes that may be required. So we're just saying once in a while we might have to get in there, and it will give you 24 hours notice. I like to put this clause in here too because it indicates that we're serious. Okay, so the buyer agrees to purchase the house in the as-is condition as seen on blank. So I'd actually fill in the date of whenever that would be, right? That at least gives them a little bit of warm and fuzzy that we're we're serious and that we're not coming in here just to kind of jerk them around. So the seller agrees to continue to care for the property as a responsible owner would and to inform the buyer of any damages or issues which might affect the value of the property until the date of closing. For example, but not limited to roof leaks, foundation cracks, water penetration into the house, tree roots damaging the sewage system, etc. All right. Now, this fourth clause here, and now, sorry, going back to number 3, I know that this sounds sometimes a little bit scary, especially if you're maybe not so familiar with how a house operates or what things to look out for. But that's what this fourth clause comes into play for. So this offers conditional upon the inspection of the subject property by the buyer's contractor or inspector and the obtaining of a report satisfactory to the buyer in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion, unless the buyer gives notice in writing, delivered to the seller personally or in accordance with any other provisions for the delivery of notices in this agreement of purchase and sale, or any schedule thereto not later than 10 business days after acceptance of this offer, that this condition is fulfilled, this offer shall be null and void, and the deposit shall be returned to the buyer in full without deduction. The seller agrees to cooperate in providing access to the property for the purpose of this inspection. This condition is included for the benefit of the buyer and may be waived at the buyer's sole option by notice in writing to the seller. Okay, so what we're saying here is that we still want an opportunity to go through and do an inspection of the property, because when we're going through there for initial walkthrough, we're in there for 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes just looking at things high level, but we want to get a contractor through. We want to get some prices in mind, and we want to be able to have the time to do that, and should something creep up on us, we want the ability to walk away. Now, this clause here protects you in the sense that if you don't like the doorknobs, you can walk away because it's in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion, right? So if something does not jive, you have a weasel clause here that can get you out of the deal, right? And you'll get your deposit check back in full, right? So if you look at the correlation up here where the buyer purchases an as-is condition as seen on that date, right? Remember, if you go through and you see something that you didn't necessarily see on that particular date, I mean, you can go back to the seller and say, "Hey, listen, we looked at it and we realized that the furnace, which we thought was newer, is actually not working and probably has a week left." Right? You can go say, "We didn't know this at the time, and we'd like to maybe renegotiate the price, take $3,000 off." So these are conversations that you can have with the seller in order to fulfill this condition. Once you fulfill the condition, then it becomes that firm deal. Okay. And lastly, I stipulated too, for the purpose of this agreement, the terms banking/business days shall mean until 11:59 p.m. on any calendar day other than Saturday, Sunday, or stat holidays in the province of Ontario. Both the buyer and seller consent to the use of electronic signatures. Sometimes if you're out of town, like if we're in Hamilton here, but we're buying a property in Oshawa, I don't necessarily want to have to drive all the way out there just to get an initial or something like that done. So this actually helps with that. But it's fine either which way as long as there's mutual consent. So another thing just to include, you see up here I put buyer Alex Powell and or assigns. So what sometimes we do is if I just put my name or my company name, I'll put in a 7th clause here that says the buyer has the right to assign this deal to another buyer or a corporation should they wish, right? That's probably not the exact wording, but I would put that in as another point here. So in case you want to keep it as just your name or just your business's name, it just once again discloses the fact that you might be doing something different than what the seller might expect, right? And once again, we want to be open, honest, upfront, not hiding anything. So just a little a tip for you guys that's something that can be included here as well. Okay. And lastly, this is something I have to put together all the time. I have to include that I'm a real estate agent and I have a real estate license. So I put this in there, and I don't take commission when I buy these off-market deals. It just doesn't work that way. So, maybe I could, but in these types of situation, I'm coming in there as a buyer, and I want to build a relationship with the seller, one based on trust and one based on mutual benefits, right? Win-win or no deal. So this is the offer. I'm going to be making a few tweaks, obviously getting the right information in there and the right dates, and then we'll be submitting this offer. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys learned a little bit about how we typically structure an offer. Now I'm going to repeat it one more time. There's a million ways to do this, right? So if you guys ever need any sort of help or you have questions, feel free to reach out. Super happy to help out with any of these situations. And quite frankly, sometimes we don't know all the answers too. So you might be better off in those types of situations. Talk to your lawyer, see what they recommend, right? But on that note too, don't let a lawyer kill a deal for you, right? You want to deal with other investors, whether it's a lawyer, real estate agent, anybody. Deal with someone who understands the investing business, understands the fact that there are certain risks in this, and we have to calculate those risks, and that's our job as an investor, okay? But truly, any questions at all, hit me up, and I'd be happy to help you, and happy investing.